Welcome to the Two Beans in a Pod by Jamie and Haley.
Hey, everyone.
So, you might have caught the recent news about the Trump administration dropping that case against Jeffrey Epstein. It definitely made waves.
It certainly did. But for us, well, it's kind of a cue to actually go deeper, isn't it?
Exactly. While the headlines are, focused there, our mission today is really to deep dive into this incredibly complex web surrounding Epstein's crimes.
And we're using Whitney Webb's book, One Nation Under Blackmail, Volume 2, as our guide here. It's meticulously researched.
Right. And this is part 2 of our exploration of that source material. We laid some groundwork before, but now we're aiming to uncover some really surprising facts, connections that you just don't get from the surface reports.
Because, the book argues this isn't just about one guy. It's about this really sordid union, generational even, between intelligence operations and organized crime.
And how that kind of environment gave rise to people like Epstein, how this whole hidden network actually functioned. So let's get into it.
Okay, so Epstein. It's fascinating. His beginnings were actually pretty humble. Born in Brooklyn, 1953, his mom was a homemaker, his dad a groundskeeper out on Coney Island.
Right, and the book mentions his parents saw education as, like, the path forward, the way up in New York.
Exactly, and he showed some early talent. Yeah. Music, right? Bassoon. Got a scholarship at 14 to the Interlochen Center for the Arts.
Yeah, but here's where it gets really disturbing later on. As an adult, Epstein donated a lot of money to Interlochen for over a decade.
And then the allegation is he used that connection, used it to recruit unwitting teenage girls, talented musicians, right into his sex trafficking and blackmail operation.
He even built the Jeffrey Epstein Scholarship Lodge there. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If he was exploiting that place later, was he maybe groomed there himself somehow?
And it's a chilling thought, raises serious questions about these cycles of exploitation. So his next big step, according to the book, getting hired at the Dalton School. Really elite place.
Despite not having the usual qualifications, right? The headmaster, Dalton Bar, apparently liked hiring, quote, unconventional teachers.
Yeah, gifted college dropouts, that was the phrase used. And Bar himself, well, he had an interesting background. OSS during World War II, the precursor to the CIA, worked at a POW camp.
And the connection that jumps out is his son, William Bar, served in the CIA 71 to 77, which crucially overlaps with his dad's time running Dalton.
And William Barr, of course, later becomes Attorney General twice, under Bush Sr. and then Trump. He was AG when Epstein was arrested in 2019 and, well, when he died.
The connections to, powerful institutions start forming almost immediately. It's kind of uncanny.
It really is. So from Dalton, Epstein goes to Bear Stearns, makes limited partner by 1980, but then he leaves abruptly, 1981.
He claimed he wanted to, run his own business?
That was his story. But inside the company, totally different narrative. Talk of technical infringement, legal operations. One exec mentioned very serious stuff about expense accounts.
And the SEC was looking into it, too. Something about the timing and insider trading. Bronfman, Seagram.
Yeah, they were interested. Epstein denied any connection, of course. But the SEC interviewers, they were apparently skeptical. It paints a picture, even early on, of someone operating, let's say, near the edge, or maybe over it.
Seems like there was smoke around him from way back then. And then right after Bear Stearns, the allegations get even more, intense.
Right. Stephen Hoffenberg, who he'd associate with later, claimed Epstein started working very closely with this, quote, mysterious British arms dealer, Sir Douglas Leese.
Hoffenberg actually said Epstein was trained in arms trafficking and money laundering.
Yeah, he claimed Epstein was trained by Adnan Koshogi and Sir Douglas Leese jointly for Israel. Pretty specific allegation.
Oh, Koshogi, the billionaire arms dealer.
The very same. Sir Douglas Leese also had a, shall we say, murky past, ties to military contractors. And Koshogi, well, the book states he was a reported client of Epstein's in the early 80s, and allegedly on the payroll of Israel's Mossad, had a revenue-sharing deal with Leese on arms deals.
And Koshogi. Wasn't there something about him using women for blackmail?
That's what the book alleges, yeah. Using women as sexual bait on his yacht to collect compromat, basically, on politicians, diplomats, celebrities, business figures.
So the idea is maybe Epstein learned that playbook from Koshogi or got pulled into that world through him.
That's a strong suggestion in the source material, yes, that this might have been his entry point into the intelligence world.
It's not just Hoffenberg saying this stuff. There's direct confirmation Sort of.
Ah.
Alex Acosta, right? When he was Secretary of Labor.
Exactly. In 2019, Acosta said he was explicitly told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. Now, which agency, when exactly, that remains unclear. But it's a bombshell statement from a cabinet secretary.
Plus, Epstein himself apparently claimed he worked for the CIA once. And there was that former Israeli military intelligence officer, Ari Ben-Menashe.
Ben-Menashe, yeah. He claimed Epstein's connection to Israeli intelligence went back to the mid-'80s. Said Robert Maxwell introduced them. Other sources, including Hoffenberg and an anonymous one, also pointed towards Israeli intelligence ties.
So, multiple threads pointing towards intelligence connections, possibly Israeli intelligence specifically.
It seems that way, according to the book, which brings us to that weird Austrian passport.
Oh, right. Found after his 2019 arrest. Expired under a different name, issued way back in the 80s, found with cash and diamonds.
Yeah, used to argue he was a flight risk. The book speculates about who could have gotten him something like that. People like Ronald Lauder are mentioned.
U.S. ambassador to Austria at the time, big Israel ties, bankrolled Netanyahu's campaign in '96, co-founded the National Endowment for Democracy.
Which, as the book points out, its own first president basically admitted did the kind of stuff the CIA used to do covertly. Lauder's deputy, Felix Bloch, was also investigated by the FBI over alleged Soviet ties. So, procuring a passport like that, it implies very high-level connections, protection, maybe.
Okay, so we've got alleged arms dealing, intelligence ties, and then there's the straight-up financial fraud, like the Towers financial Ponzi scheme.
Right, with Stephen Hoffenberg. Hoffenberg called Epstein a genius, but, lacking morals. Epstein was on Hoffenberg's payroll from '87 to '93. Got a big loan, too.
And Towers started constructing one of the largest frauds in history, right when Epstein got involved.
Coincidence? The book suggests not. And efforts were apparently made to shield Epstein from fallout right up until his 2019 arrest, even though Hoffenberg did implicate him in testimony back in '93.
Just layer upon layer. And then there's that weird office sharing situation in the early 90s with Evangeline Galetis Carey.
Yeah, in the Helmsley Hotel building, the Villard houses. Her husband was Hugh Carey, former NY governor. The Galetis family had this, explosion of wealth. Nobody knew quite where it came from. Greek shipping, Middle East money.
Or, as the book mentions, possibly organized crime interests from Chicago.
Yeah.
And Hugh Carey himself had some shady campaign finance links.
Yeah.
Gambino crime family associate.
And check this out. A company overseen by Galetis Carey, IMB Capital, they acquired Electronic Realty Associates, ERA, and its remote mortgage origination software.
Okay.
IMB Capital's New York headquarters, 457 Madison Ave, the exact same address as the office Epstein shared with Galetis Carey.
Whoa. So suggesting maybe Epstein was tied into that operation too, whatever it was.
It certainly hints at a connection, yeah. More financial entanglement in these very opaque circles.
Let's shift gears a bit. Wider influence networks. Donald Trump comes up again. They met in '87.
Apparently so, maybe through Hoffenberg. Trump rented Epstein a floor in Trump Tower, and then Trump bought the Plaza Hotel in '88.
The Plaza, wasn't that linked to Roy Cohn? And alleged parties involving minors?
That's what the book alleges, yeah. Sexual blackmail parties involving minors, with Roy Cohn, Trump's lawyer, mentor, friend, supposedly involved. Trump himself attended Epstein's parties later, Palm Beach, Manhattan.
And that quote from Trump in 2002, it's pretty infamous now, about Epstein being a terrific guy liking beautiful women, many of them on the younger side.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life. Chilling, looking back. It shows a certain normalization, maybe, or at least proximity.
Another huge figure in Epstein's world, Leslie Wexner, the limited brands billionaire.
The bachelor billionaire. His story is also pretty strange. Mentored by figures like Max Fisher, A. Alfred Taubman, big names in business and pro-Israel circles.
And Wexner talked about having a Debuck, like from Jewish folklore, a spirit.
He did, yeah. In a 1985 New York Magazine piece, described it as this sort of malicious spirit causing anxiety, restlessness, this compulsion to just accumulate more money and more power. He even called it integral to his genius.
That unsettling. And the book links Wexner to organized crime, too. The murder of his lawyer, Arthur Shapiro.
Right, 1985. Described in a suppressed report as an organized crime-style murder, the report apparently implied Wexner's associate, John Kessler, might have been a middleman. Wexner himself got police protection after. Plus, other associates had alleged links to Israeli intelligence, Koshogi, even the mob.
So, Wexner's empire potentially built on, or at least intertwined with, some really dark stuff.
That's the implication drawn from the sources. And what happens next? Epstein basically takes over Wexner's financial life.
Becomes head of Wexner Investment Company in 1990.
And then July 91, Wexner gives him that power of attorney, near complete control over his affairs. It's a staggering amount of trust, or maybe control, handed over.
Meanwhile, Wexner's foundation is busy shaping future leaders, bringing Israeli national security figures to Harvard.
And that leads to the mega group, this alleged secret group of billionaires: Wexner, the Bronfmans, Tisch, Spielberg, Fisher, revealed in 98.
Supposedly linked to organized crime and intelligence networks, aiming to influence U.S. policy towards Israel.
That's the allegation. And they reportedly lobbied hard for Mark Rich's pardon from Clinton, along with Israeli intelligence figures. The book even mentions a Wexner analysis document from 2003 laying out PR strategies for Israel regarding the Iraq War.
So we're seeing these alleged networks potentially trying to steer major geopolitical events. It's mind-boggling stuff.
It really is. The scale of the alleged influence is vast.
Okay, pause for a second. You've just heard about some frankly shocking connections. Alleged intelligence ties, organized crime links, powerful figures intertwined. If you're finding this deep dive as eye-opening as we are, please take a moment, hit that like button, and subscribe to the deep dive. It really helps us keep digging into these important stories.
Please do. Okay, so back to the Clintons. Epstein's White House visits. 17 of them, starting 93, often with attractive young women.
And his connection was Mark Middleton, a Clinton aide. Epstein also donated to that White House Historical Association fundraiser, alongside some figures linked to the BCCI scandal.
Correct. And that fundraiser pops up again in the context of Vince Foster's death.
Right. The deputy White House counsel found dead in 93. His death is just surrounded by questions and weirdness, according to the book. Lack of blood, missing weapon, FBI interfering with witnesses.
And allegations that Foster was under NSA surveillance. Claims he was selling classified info, presidential codes, nuclear options to Israel, or maybe China, via Swiss bank accounts.
And his supposed suicide note mentioned that specific fundraiser, the one Epstein donated to.
It did, which, the book suggests, could point towards espionage or money laundering being somehow connected to his death. It's a murky, controversial event that intersects with these networks.
Which flows right into Chinagate, another huge scandal involving DNC fundraising.
Absolutely. You had figures like John Huang tied to the Lippo Group and Chinese state entities deemed an agent of espionage. Charlie Tri linked to Macau casinos and Chinese arms dealers like Wang Jun, who was later photographed with Clinton.
Money flowing from alleged Chinese military intelligence sources to people like Mark Middleton.
Over $500,000, the book alleges, to do good things for China. And then Loral Space Systems, a big Clinton donor, investigated for illegally sending advanced tech to China.
And Israel was allegedly involved in selling tech to China too, even U.S. Patriot missile tech.
That's what Pentagon and CIA reports suggested at the time, raising concerns within the Bush administration prior to Clinton. It paints this picture of foreign influence, alleged corruption, tech transfers, all swirling around the highest levels.
And even after the presidency, Clinton kept flying on Epstein's plane.
6 trips, 26 flights, between 2002 and 2003. Epstein's lawyers even claimed he helped conceive the Clinton Global Initiative.
Where did they go on these trips?
All over. Asia in May 2002, Hong Kong, Shenzhen briefly, Singapore for meetings with WEF figures, Brunei to meet the Sultan.
The Sultan, whose family faced those disturbing accusations of illegal sexual behavior and who owned the building Epstein had his office in.
The very same. Then an Africa trip, September 2002. Clinton reportedly flouted his normal security protocols. Epstein was there, Ghislaine Maxwell, Sarah Kellen, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker.
Quite the entourage.
Yeah.
What was the trip supposedly about?
Promoting AIDS curtailment, economic development. Clinton launched a foundation focused on property reform, also advising Ron Burkle's company at the time, who was often on these trips too. Plus, people like Ira Magaziner, Doug Bann, Gail Smith, former Clinton aides, some with USAID ties, which the book notes is sometimes seen as a CIA cutout.
It just seems like Epstein remained deeply embedded, even post-presidency, in these elite circles involved in global initiatives.
And the book connects Epstein and Wexner to potentially facilitating covert operations through airlines. Aero Air, Southern Air Transport.
Weren't they linked to Iran-Contra?
Heavily. And they were allegedly courted to operate out of an airstrip in Ohio connected to Wexner's company, The Limited, in the early 90s. Key Iran-Contra figures were supposedly involved in setting this up, despite claims the airlines were no longer tied to the CIA.
Suggesting maybe a logistics angle for these networks?
It points towards ongoing connections to covert logistics and intelligence infrastructure, yes.
Okay, let's talk about the mechanics of the trafficking itself. The modeling industry connection seems key.
Absolutely. Jean-Luc Brunel, the model scout, is a central figure, according to the source material. Flew constantly on Epstein's plane, visited him dozens of times in prison.
Epstein tried to buy elite models and funded Brunel's agency, MC2,
Yeah.
paid for visas.
Yes. Gave Brunel a $1 million line of credit. Housed Brunel's models in an apartment owned by Epstein's brother, Mark. And these models were allegedly loaned out for huge sums.
Virginia Jeffrey confirmed this, right? Said Brunel recruited girls from poor backgrounds, promised them money, then forced them into sex.
She did. Her testimony is crucial. And Ghislaine Maxwell, of course, her role was pivotal.
The book calls her a constant fixture at Victoria's Secret events, acting like a Nazi guard with young models.
Allegedly recruiting victims everywhere, Interlaken, performing arts schools, even Mar-a-Lago, where she recruited Virginia Jeffrey with promises of opportunity.
Her method was apparently feigning friendship, breaking down boundaries, normalizing the abuse.
Exactly. Priming the victims. Testimonies describe her being actively involved in the grooming, the abuse itself, wearing costumes, participating. It's deeply disturbing. There are even allegations about her being seen pregnant and Epstein's interest in surrogates and eugenics.
Just awful. And Epstein's reach extended beyond that, into academia, into tech.
Yeah, connections to the New York Academy of Art, art dealers, but also big tech figures. Nathan Myhrvold, Microsoft's first CTO, he introduced Epstein to Esther Dyson, the influential tech consultant and WEF member.
Links to Thinking Machines Corporation people, too. Marvin Minsky, who Jeffrey also accused. Eric Lander, who became Biden's science advisor.
All mentioned in the book. And then there's John Brockman, the software agent who ran the Edge Foundation and its Billionaires Dinner. That gave Epstein access to the absolute tech elite, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, SpaceX founders and execs.
Myhrvold, Bill Gates, Joy Ito from MIT Media Lab. They were all part of Brockman's circle.
Right. And Brockman himself had alleged intelligence ties, potentially passing a KGB manuscript to the CIA. It seems Epstein was trying hard to pivot, rebrand himself as a tech investor before that final arrest.
And the Gates Foundation connection.
Yeah.
The book claims Epstein was intimately involved in planning aspects of it, and the Clinton Foundation.
That's the assertion. Significant donations flowed from Gates to Clinton's initiatives. Hillary Clinton announced a partnership between their foundations in 2014.
And Gates had met with Epstein just months before that, discussing philanthropy.
Yes, according to the book. Plus, Epstein's science advisor, Melanie Walker, got hired by the Gates Foundation in 2006. Gates's chief science advisor, Boris Nikolic, was in a 2011 meeting with Gates, Epstein, James Staley from JP Morgan, Larry Summers.
Nikolic, wasn't he named as Epstein's backup executor? But turned it down.
He was. And Nikolic's firm now invests in gene editing and organ transplant tech, some linked to eugenicist George Church, whom Gates also funded. It suggests Epstein wasn't just networking, but potentially influencing the direction of major philanthropy and cutting-edge, potentially controversial, science.
Which brings us to the future of blackmail, as the book sees it. Technology replacing the human operators.
That's the argument. Epstein and Maxwell becoming irrelevant and expendable because tech-based blackmail is more efficient, more scalable. After his first arrest, Epstein started investing in data harvesting, mass surveillance firms.
Like Carby 9/11, that pre-crime startup, backed by Epstein and Ehud Barak after Epstein's conviction.
Exactly. And Carbon is loaded with ties to Israeli intelligence unit 8200, plus Peter Thiel, Palantir founder, Trump ally, also an investor. Former Trump officials like Michael Chertoff and Christian Nielsen got involved too.
The privacy implications sound huge. Pulling data from your phone even if you don't have the app.
If you call a 911 center using their system, yes. Location, live video, texts, and the goal is NG 911, next generation 911, connecting all these systems, giving potentially vast data access. It's blackmail evolving.
And Palantir. The book calls it the Privatized Panopticon, linked to MainCore, that database of unfriendly Americans.
Yes, MainCore, developed using the controversial Promise software for continuity of government, or figures like Oliver North. Palantir is also linked to the Total Information Awareness Program, TIA.
That mass surveillance program Poindexter ran after 9/11. I thought that got shut down.
Publicly defunded, yes, but the book argues its programs just went underground and Palantir developed the core software. The CIA, through In-Q-Tel, was its only client for years. A key CIA official involved in TIA was also key in Palantir's development.
So essentially privatizing mass surveillance, giving government deniability.
Plausible deniability for government, for corporations, that's the idea. And Ghislaine Maxwell's company, Chiliad, fits in here too.
A successor to her father's Promise-linked companies, with the same Palantir TA guy, Alan Wade, as chairman.
Exactly. Suggesting Chiliad might also have carried a backdoor like Promise was alleged to. It later pivoted to healthcare data before shutting down. Wade then moved to Darktrace, linked to UK intelligence, managing power grid, and NHS data. The web keeps expanding.
It's a chilling picture. As we live more online, we create more data that can be exploited.
And when AI can analyze all that data, the human blackmailers, the Epsteins and Maxwells, they become liabilities, easier to silence them. Mass surveillance enables mass control, mass blackmail potentially.
The book argues these systems, main core, TIA, they never went away. They're just waiting.
Yep.
Waiting to be turned on the population if people demand too much change.
It's a stark warning. This whole story, as laid out in the book, reveals these deep generational networks of crime and just how corroded our institutions, government, media might be.
And maybe our willingness to go along with things comes from a belief that, well, things aren't that corrupt.
Right. But the final thought the book leaves you with is, the more our lives are on phones, on computers, the more vulnerable we become. If or when groups with access to that data decide they want something from us.
Understanding that reality, maybe that's the first step. Reclaiming some agency, breaking free from this digital dependence that could be used to enslave us.
A sobering thought to end on.
Definitely. Before we wrap up, if this deep dive has given you food for thought, please do hit that like button and subscribe. It helps others find this information and ensures you won't miss our future explorations.
Thank you for listening to Two Beans in a Pod. If you are interested in the book, please order it from the link below.